Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I appreciate the organizers for inviting us and letting us be here. We were talking earlier today. I think this is our 12th ARM meeting, and CTI has been a sponsor since inception. Over the next 15 minutes, just to give you a bit of the color around the company, which was formed 24 years ago. We have become one of the 20 largest clinical research organizations across the globe, and we have associates now in 68 or 69 countries, as I recall, and we're described as being the largest and oldest privately owned clinical research organization where the founders are still active. We do have a full offering of services that I'll walk through in the next few minutes. Would like to highlight that we work on behalf of more than 330 pharma, biotech, medical device companies, as well as a number of major academic centers, payers, and different government organizations. We have been part of more than 175 approvals by FDA, EMA, and other regulatory authorities around the globe, and we're quite proud of that. And I think for those that have known the company for a long time, we feel like we have an industry-leading employee retention rate, which ensures that when your regulatory and clinical programs extend over many years, that there will be a team that's intact throughout the entire process. As mentioned, our global footprint allows us to go from an early stage, maybe first in man, phase 1 study, locating in one jurisdiction and expanding that to late phase studies that require multiple jurisdictions. The light blue circles you see on the slide represent CTI offices. The dark blue color represents countries with CTI employees, and the two yellow circles represent our newest additions, which are CTI laboratories that I'll talk about in just a few moments. Our therapeutic specialty or focus since inception, more than 80% of all of CTI's programs have involved rare disease, and more recently, over the last dozen years or so, 50% or more of all projects involve cell or gene therapy. We are probably one of the biggest cheerleaders of the industry. We've been able to see up close and personal many of the early programs started 10 years or more that have now gone through FDA, EMA, and other approvals. Beyond the rare disease and regenerative medicine background, we have very heavy emphasis across areas like immunology, oncology, nephrology, et cetera. About 25% of all of CTI's work involves children. We are very comfortable working in the space, including neonates. We've had a number of programs historically, in fact, where we've actually had pregnant mothers where the baby is diagnosed in utero and the mother's flown to one of the research sites. Baby's delivered, and we're able to treat the baby in the first few days of life with either a cell or gene therapy that can either be life-saving or obviously allow for a disease not to spread quickly. This slide just highlights some recent awards. CTI has been chosen as the #1 CRO globally multiple times over the last 10 years. Most recently, just in the last few weeks, Sightline gave us an award as the best contract research organization in the specialty field, and that included cell and gene therapy. This slide that you see behind me actually lists the 5 business units that we have and includes the service offerings. I want to highlight that we can take a molecule from early preclinical stage, be involved on behalf of the sponsor, and negotiate the early regulatory pathway from preclinical into the clinic. Our team is well-versed in the regulatory offerings to be able to serve as the primary regulatory provider for sponsors globally, or to fill gaps where they might not have the expertise in certain countries or certain regions. From a clinical operations standpoint, we are a full-service clinical research organization that has all the offerings you might expect, including project management, data management, statistics, programming, pharmacovigilance, safety, regulatory affairs, quality assurance, et cetera. And we do those, like I mentioned, at any given time. We are managing well over 150 global clinical trials. We do have our own research site here in the United States, which can be quite beneficial for sponsors where they're looking to do healthy volunteer studies, first in man, single escalating dose, multiple escalating dose, food effect, drug interaction studies. We also do an increasing amount of phase 2 through 4 patient studies in this unit as well. well. And as mentioned, over the last few years, we have added global laboratory capabilities with a particular emphasis on cell and gene therapy programs. And then finally, our real-world evidence team is very active in the pricing and reimbursement work around cell and gene programs, and obviously is involved very much in evidence generation, historical and observation studies, natural history, as well as a lot of medical publishing. This slide and the next one just highlight some of the important services around global regulatory support. And I would just mention here that you can see really early stage interactions with something in the U.S. called an Interact meeting, including work going through pre-IND and IND phase, all the way through end of phase 1, end of phase 2, and ultimately submissions with full dossiers. In addition to that, a lot of substantial work around pediatric investigational plans, increasing amount work around diversity plans. If you as a sponsor have not interacted with FDA recently, that is something that is coming up more and more frequently relative to their request. This is not mandatory yet, but it's something we are encountering on a really frequent basis and are being very proactive. Also a lot of work around things like prime designation, orphan designations, et cetera. And then ultimately final submission production of BLAs and NDAs and supplemental applications around the globe. Did want to highlight on the medical writing side, at any given time, our team is typically working on many protocol synopsis as well as full protocols, and also very aggressive and comprehensive in their post-marketing lifecycle management support as well. A group that we have expanded over the last several years is a drug-informed model development group. I think many of you may be aware of the challenges that preclinical models are typically not particularly predictive of doses or routes of administration when we consider large molecules and specifically cell and gene products. This is a global group for us that is particularly helpful in taking a modeling approach to understand the best route of administration and the best dosing strategy to optimize, especially first-in-man studies, or to look at data from early dose escalation studies and optimize the dose so that we're able to skip sometimes a number of cohorts or compress them together, and ultimately that will allow us to have a quicker, more informed study with a lower cost and better safety and efficacy information. Specifically in the cell and gene area, being able to do PK and PD modeling specific to different oncolytic viruses, things like AAV vector and cell-based products is a specialty of this group, and it's one that they are also able to adapt from adult data or models into pediatric models, which can be particularly important in the oncology setting. As I alluded to a few minutes ago, over the last several years at the request of the sponsors we work for, we have been hearing over and over again the lack of quality service, especially for emerging companies trying to get bioanalytical services, trying to get tech transfer from academic developed laboratory methodologies that are not GLP to just companies who are looking for biorepository capabilities for samples that have to be stored for many years. We elected to build 2 laboratories, one in North America and one in Europe, and both of these laboratories are pictured on the slide behind me here, and you can see the full capabilities with the appropriate accreditations, and our next leg of that stool is an Asian laboratory that we likely will build over the coming 12 to 18 months. So we feel like this is really important, especially in the regenerative medicine area. Some highlights of the laboratory capabilities. Many of you in the audience may have been struggled with some of these same problems, but throughout COVID and since COVID, sometimes something as simple as lab supplies. We saw studies delayed significantly looking for purple top tubes or looking for kit building capabilities, and we've now taken those over ourselves and are able to do those either as part of a full service clinical study management or just as one-offs for friends and sponsors who are struggling struggling to get that service. This kit building is particularly useful and timely needed sometimes when studies progress more quickly than we thought, or where sites are added or geographies are added. To be able to do this globally and provide these in a matter of days can be really helpful. Also, just want to highlight on the right-hand side part of the slide the safety test menu. So we have a full complement of all safety testing, which one of the things that we have found is sometimes going to the largest global laboratory providers with a 25-patient cell or gene therapy program, where things like hematology, coagulation, serologies, chemistries are needed. Those laboratories obviously are best set up for 25,000 patient studies rather than 25 patient studies. And so we find having these capabilities ourselves, we're able to be able to step in quickly and provide this. Just to give you a sense, about 60% of all the sponsors that CTI work with fall in the small to mid-sized categories. We feel like we're particularly suited for their timelines, for their budgets, and for the sensitivity around the importance of a study meeting its endpoints relative to the overall success of the company. And as highlighted before, well over 100 companies that fall into that category currently that we're working with. We feel like we have the broadest, deepest regenerative medicine clinical research experience in the world. We're quite proud of that. Across the organization, well over 80+% of all of our associates have been on regenerative medicine studies. We have been part of more than half of all FDA and EMA approvals in the cell and gene therapy world, all the way back to some of the first ones that were approved, where our work started more than a dozen years ago. And the good news is more than 90% of those sponsors have given CTI additional business. I think that's particularly impactful when you think of how many of those companies maybe have been acquired or unfortunately have gone out of business. And so essentially almost all the ones that have remained in business have been able to come back to us and chosen us to move forward with further work, which we find to be very gratifying. As highlighted, we have currently more than 50 sponsors, and we are involved in more than 100 contemporary and historical cell and gene therapy trials in the clinic. These are ones where we were partnering with the company to get through the regulatory startup, get into first patient dosed. And I can give you an example. Just this last quarter, when we looked at our statistics, we had 12 new studies that we launched in the cell and gene space, and we had 8 first patients treated during the quarter. So we are seeing a continual momentum in the space, and these are largely, with sponsors who are moving first-time products into phase 1, or ones where we've had successful early phase programs and now moving them into late phase pivotal trials. Just want to highlight here a couple of points. One, the type of cell or gene sources. We are very comfortable across all gene vectors, and we're quite comfortable across all different cell sources. And I think the route of administration is something we've seen an evolution on over the last half dozen years or so. It used to be in our earliest experience with cell and gene products, almost all were administered intravenously. More recently, on a regular basis, we're seeing administration, for instance, for ophthalmology programs directly into the eye. We're seeing neurodegenerative treatments that are going right into the spinal cord or the brain directly. We're seeing, obviously, oncology programs where administration is going directly into the liver, into the bladder, into the ovary, et cetera. So the team is well versed in those challenges, and we feel like our lessons learned can be a huge benefit for somebody who's new to the space. This slide shows you a sense about half of all of our programs are allogeneic and about half are autologous. If you look, roughly half are cell-based and half are gene-based. And then finally, if you look, we certainly have a preponderance of phase 1 and phase 2, but I think that's reflective of the number of new compounds that are under development as opposed to just not having as many in phase 3. These numbers compare pretty similarly to ARM's annual statistics. They may be off by a few percent, but they, I think, reflect the industry as much as our own experience. This slide just highlights over a couple of years the approvals that CTI was part of, both in North America as well as in Europe. And as highlighted, this slide shows, I believe, about a half a dozen of cell or gene programs that we were partnered with the sponsor. In most cases, these were from phase 1 through the pivotal trials. So I know at least several of these we had 8 to 10 year follow-up experience, especially in some of our early phase 1. And this is just a continuation of that, looking at 2022 approvals and either current or expected 2023 approvals. I think the takeaway message would be we have an extensive, long experience in this regard. We feel like we are the most integrated of the CROs across the space, being able to take a molecule from the preclinical stages to approval, and we feel like we have now supported hundreds of projects across more than a dozen years, and as mentioned, about half of all approved cell and gene therapy programs, CTI has been able to be partnered with the sponsor and continued throughout the entire drug development, and our large global footprint and our full suite of services allows us to partner in just about every capacity. So thank you very much for the time this afternoon.